John Knox was born in Scotland in 1513. He was a Scottish minister, theologian, and writer. He was the leader of the Scottish Reformation and founder of the Presbyterian Church of Scotland. He was educated in St. Andrews and worked as a notary priest. John Wishart was a fellow Scottish reformer, and he had a great influence upon Knox, and they became great friends. They traveled around the country together as teacher and student, but John Wishart was captured and eventually martyred in St. Andrews. St. Andrews is where Knox preached his first sermon, and because of the great power in his preaching, that marked him as a big target. And in 1547, he was captured by the French and taken prisoner as a French galley slave. The conditions as this French galley slave were very harsh, and he had very poor health from then on. He worked as a slave until 19 months later when he was released. And in 1549, he worked in the Church of England as a spiritual advisor and chaplain to King Edward VI. In 1554, he was forced to leave because Mary Tudor became queen, and she reestablished Catholicism, and Knox left the country because of that. He left the country and went to Geneva, where he met John Calvin and gained great knowledge of the Reformed theology and Presbyterian polity, creating a new order of service that was later adopted by the church in Scotland. And he spent 3 years in Geneva learning further Reformed truth, and he was a preacher and pastor of the English-speaking congregation that met in the Calvin Auditorium. He wrote several important works and even had some printed. One of them was his work on predestination, which Calvin helped him a lot in. He also had part in the production of the Geneva Bible, and he helped with the annotations and translating and proofreading it. He formed great relations with the reformers there in Geneva, but most especially was Calvin. And he picked up great solid biblical faiths and principles of the Reformation through Calvin, and he greatly helped him in church polity and worship. John Calvin described what he found there in Geneva as was the most perfect school of Christ since the day of the apostles, and he really wanted to have that type of model in Scotland. So the Geneva Church really influenced what he wanted for Scotland. And in 1555, the Genevan Church voted Knox to be their minister, and he accepted. He lived in Geneva for 2 years preaching and in the Calvin Auditorium, and he loved the church there in Geneva. He quoted saying, "I neither fear nor ashamed to say it is the most perfect school of Christ that was ever in the earth since the days of the apostles. In other days I confessed Christ to be truly preached, but manners and religion are so sincerely reformed I had not yet seen in any other place." And another one of his writings was the first blast of the trumpet against the monstrous regiment of women, and he wrote that in 1558, and that was basically to demonstrate his feelings about women as leaders and how, in his opinion, abominable they were before God. And he specifically was writing them for Queen Mary of England and Queen Mary of Scotland. In 1559, he went back to Scotland, and he took on his ministry there in St. Giles Cathedral, where he wrote the Scots Confession of Faith and the Book of Common Order. No matter where he went, he had a constant love for his home in Scotland. He quoted saying, "Give me Scotland or I die." He had unflinching determination, and he feared no face of man, and his zeal for the gospel did not burn, even when there were many people being martyred for their faith. And Queen Mary of the Scots was one who many reformers were very afraid of, but Knox stood fearlessly and boldly for his faith in front of her. And although she charged him with heresy, he pointed to the supremacy and consistency of the Bible, that he was able to stand, and that caused him that he was able to stand before the challenging questions that were brought before him. So his boldness and intellect served him very well. Another huge aspect that he had in his life was his prayer life, and it was said that she feared his prayer life more than 10,000 men armed and ready for war. So I think that speaks loudly about the kind of life he had. And in 1572 he died, but he was notable not so much for the overthrow of Roman Catholicism in Scotland, but mostly for assuring the replacement and the establishment of Christian religion with Presbyterianism rather than Anglicanism. And it was because of Knox that the Presbyterian polity was established, and he was considered the notable founder of the Presbyterian denomination.